Greetings everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We're back again with more Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, and this time we are quickly approaching the end of my Lich playthrough. It took 100 episodes, but we're just about there, and that means we're finally ready to start digging in to Lich builds. And I figured, why not start with the build that I used throughout the game. So as you can see, I used Professor Snape. That was my name throughout the playthrough. It made sense to me at the beginning of the playthrough. Basically, I wanted my character to be someone who was willing to do very, very dark and evil deeds for the good of all. Of course, later on in the playthrough, he kind of abandoned that and sunk all the way into evil, but there was a time when he was a very good man. And it seemed to me that Professor Snape fit in perfectly with my idea of how to roleplay this character. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So we're going to be a Lich Cruoromancer, and the game kind of presents this as the official Lich class. You have to be a Dhampir. You're specializing in necromancy spells. Sounds pretty much perfect, right? But in reality, it doesn't really work all that great because the mechanics of this class do not scale as you increase in level. So basically what you get are infusions. So right off the bat, you're going to get a blood infusion. When the Cruoromancer uses this infusion, he adds +1 to the DC of the infused necromancy spell. You're also going to get sickened, which will sicken any enemy that you damage with a necromancy spell when you activate this particular infusion. And activating the infusions will take a portion of your health. Now then at level 5, you get a commanding infusion, which is going to give your summoned skeletons a +4 enhancement bonus to strength and constitution, as if they were affected by the augment summoning feat. So this can be really, really nice. And then all the way at the end, you're able to use the infusions without taking damage. But long before then, the amount of damage that they take will pretty much become irrelevant. Like I said, this stuff doesn't really scale as you get higher and higher in level. And so I would say some of the mechanics of being a different wizard or a cross-blooded sorcerer are probably better than this. But from a role-playing standpoint, it fits in with the Lich like a glove. So I really didn't regret going ahead and taking it. And I still had a ton of fun in the game. Now, of course, you have to be a Dhampir, and we're going to be male. For heritage, I went with Vitalaborn. You're going to get a +2 racial bonus to dexterity and intelligence, and I would say that those are your most important attributes. You do take a -2 penalty to wisdom that I would recommend you don't eat, so it's going to cause you to use a couple of extra attribute points. But I would still say out of all the options available to you, this one makes the most sense from a mechanic standpoint. From a role-playing standpoint, I probably would have preferred going Vampire Kingborn, but taking those 2-point bonus into strength and then taking a -2 penalty to dexterity is just something I really couldn't justify. Okay, and then background selection, we're going to go regional, and then we're going to be a Gebite Necromancer, which means when you summon undead creatures and companions, they're going to get a +3 bonus to maximum hit points, which obviously works great in this particular build. And then for attribute points, we're going to dump strength. You do not need strength at all. We're going to bring dexterity up to 16. We're going to put a couple of points in the constitution. You should be all the way in the back, so you really shouldn't be getting hit much. We're going to raise intelligence all the way up to 20. It's by far your most important attribute. We're going to put 12 points into wisdom, and then we're going to leave charisma at 10. So I personally played my Lich as someone who is not particularly charismatic and really doesn't talk all that much unless it's absolutely necessary. My Lich is all about action. Of course, you could change this around a little bit, maybe drop intelligence down to 19 or 18, put a couple of more points into charisma if that's something that's important to you. But I was going for a particular type of character, and I was comfortable being weak in persuasion. And honestly, I did feel that during the playthrough. There were a bunch of persuasion checks that would have made things easier that I ended up failing because I didn't have charisma, and nobody else on my undead team had a good way of making up for that charisma either. All right, then as far as skills, definitely recommend you take a point in Knowledge Arcana. Of course, you're a Lich, so it makes sense that you know and understand magic. You get a +5 bonus in Knowledge World, so I think it also makes sense. You might as well go ahead and take a point in that. You're also going to get a +5 in Stealth because you have a +3 in Dexterity, and you get a +2 racial bonus from your background. So I would say you might as well go ahead and take a point in Stealth. I don't feel like the Lich specializes particularly well in nature or religion, and there are other characters you get that will pretty much take care of those. So I don't bother focusing on that. Makes sense to me that the Lich is skilled in use magic device, so I go ahead and take a point in that. And then even though it's not a class skill and we don't get any particular bonuses to it, you all know how I feel about perception. Might as well go ahead and take a point in that as well. And then keep in mind, you're going to be raising intelligence all throughout your level ups, so you're going to get a lot more skill points, and you will have flexibility to specialize in some other areas if you so choose. And then for your first feat, I would scroll down and get Life Dominant Soul. So this is going to allow you to be healed by channeled positive energy, but you're only going to be healed by half the normal amount. Keep in mind, only channeled positive energy is going to help you. So cure light wounds, cure moderate wounds, those will still harm you. They'll do nothing for you. But when a cleric channels energy, you will be able to benefit, and that's actually a huge relief for the healer in your group. And then for a wizard bonus feat, I'm going to go Spell Focus and then Necromancy, which is going to add a +1 to the DC of all saving throws against spells from the Necromancy school. Notice I did not pick up Spell Penetration. Now, that's a choice I made during my playthrough. All of the spells that you actually get from the Lich Mythic path automatically break through enemy spell defense. So as a Lich, you do not need to have Spell Penetration. So I made the decision that in the levels leading up to become Lich, I was going to focus on spells that did not require Spell Penetration and just focused on the DC, because then when I became a Lich, I would already have the type of build that would take full advantage of the Lich spells that were going to become available. If for whatever reason you're a person who prefers some of the other spells that do require spell penetration, of course you could go ahead and focus on those instead. As you'll see later on in the build, there's actually a lot of flexibility in what feats you use for this particular setup. And then opposition school, it's kind of up to you what it is, what kind of spells you feel like you absolutely don't need. Obviously, we cannot choose Necromancy because Necromancy is the school of magic that we want to be focused in on. So me personally, I chose Enchantment, and then I chose Divination. You definitely do not want to choose Illusion. There are actually illusion spells that tie in very, very nicely with this build, but everything else is pretty much up to you. All right, and then for the level 1 spells, I'm actually not going to go level by level for the spells in this particular build. At the end of the build, we're going to go through the entire spell list, and then I'll explain what spells I feel like are really useful and which ones you might want to focus on. The reason for that is that you get a lot of options for spells as a Lich. When you do your mythic level ups, the entire list of spells that your level allows will be available for you to choose from. So the level where I chose a particular spell might be completely different from the level where you chose a particular spell. So I think it makes more sense to just go level 1 spells, level 2 spells. This is what's important. And then you figure out during your playthrough what you actually want to take and what's important to you. But everybody has to go through level 1, so we can go ahead and look at that. Definitely would say Call Sphere is a nice debuff to be able to put on enemies you're going up against. Sealer will benefit a lot from Enlarged Person. The Lich will benefit from expeditious retreat when you're in those areas like Dresden or any camp area where you want to run around fast but don't have access to haste. Grease is a great way to control the battlefield. Mage Armor is going to give you some additional protection. Magic Missile is going to give you a little bit more offensive firepower. Reduced Person is very advantageous for your archers, or maybe people use daggers that would benefit from some additional dexterity. Shield is also going to give your Lich some additional protection as well. Only other thing I would probably add from level 1, it can be nice sometimes having Summon Monster for you to be able to just start a battle by throwing out a throwaway summon, and then they'll waste their powers or a bunch of attacks on it while your party members come in and try to do mop-up work. And for the deity, we're going to go with Urgathoa. So she fits Lich like a glove. There's a lot of reactivity to you having Urgathoa as your deity. She definitely approves of a lot of the things that you have to do. And if for whatever reason you wanted to do a Death Knight type of build instead of a magic user build like what we're doing for this particular go around, she does provide favorite weapon scythe. So that'll give you a leg up as well. We went lawful evil. Over time, I think it became more like neutral evil. And for the voice, I chose pragmatic. For your level 3 feat, I would go with greater spell focus, necromancy. At level 4, you want to increase intelligence and continue increasing intelligence during all of your level ups. For your level 5 feat, get improved initiative. For your level 7 feat, I get meta magic and power spell. For your level 9 feat, I get brew potions. So as a Lich, more than likely, you're going to be using an undead party. There are no other primary spellcasters among the undead party members. You do get one bard, and you have the option of making the skeletal marksman you get a bard and or a cleric. But even if you do that for the marksman, he's not going to get access to those really high level spells. So consequently, if you're using an undead party, the Lich is by far the main spellcaster. Therefore, if you want to have the Lich focused on offensive spells, it might behoove you to go ahead and have someone who's regularly creating scrolls and potions of some of the other spells that are going to be useful that you would not necessarily have access to. Or even if your Lich does have access to it, you don't want that spell filling up all of your slots. An example is haste. I prefer to just go ahead and make potions of haste because I don't want to fill up 7 or 8 slots just with the haste spell when they could instead be used for some of those fantastic offensive Lich powers. Okay, so now at level 11, honestly, from here on out, you can choose anything you like from the feats and the wizard bonus feats. In my opinion, you've already picked up the feats that are really going to be able to help the Lich be able to do the things that you would want him to be able to do, and everything else is really just flavoring. So by all means, pick whatever feat you like that will help fill out your style a little bit more. You could go ahead and get the 2 penetration feats. If you wanted to use a wider variety of spells than what I'm going to showcase and the spell listing, it is completely up to you. Okay, so now that we've went through the regular character levels, let's go ahead and take a look at the mythic options. For your first ascension, I'm going to choose Dance Macabre. It's going to give you the ability to channel negative energy even if you're not a cleric, which is obviously very useful for you as a Lich. And at Mythic level 1, let's go ahead and take Abundant Casting. At Mythic level 2, let's go ahead and take Spell Focus, Necromancy, which is going to increase the DCs of Necromancy spells that you cast by 2, making them much harder to resist. At Mythic level 3, let's go ahead and take Improved Abundant Casting. So we're going to be combining spell books, which means the amount of spells that you, or rather the spell level that you have when you first turn Lich is going to be significantly higher than usual. So you're immediately going to be able to benefit from having improved abundant casting, because I believe you get level 6 spells right off the bat. Okay, and it's going to ask you, do you want to just use the book separately or combine your spell book? And we're definitely going to go ahead and choose to combine it. Now you also get a skeletal champion, and this is basically a pet that will walk around with you just about everywhere and assist in combat. And you get to basically choose a template for this character. So you don't get to choose the specific skills and feats that it takes like your other party members. Basically, you choose one of these templates and then some things will automatically be added for you. In my personal opinion, for this first template that you get to choose from, Skeletal Marksman has the best distribution of feats and attribute points that the Skeletal Champion will get access to. And for your first Lich power, I go ahead and choose Magic Devourer, which is going to give you a significant boost in spell resistance. And whenever an enemy fails a check made to overcome the Lich's spell resistance, the next spell the Lich would cast becomes Quickened, which obviously is going to be very useful to you. And then, like I mentioned before, on a lot of these mythic ranks, you are going to be able to choose from the entire list of spells. So you'll be able to dibble and dabble in whatever way you decide. So there is, as always, a spreadsheet associated with this build. You can see the overall spells that you need and then go ahead and pick accordingly. At Mythic level 4, I go into extra mythic ability and then get greater abundant casting. By the time you can get Mythic level 4, more than likely you've already opened up spell level 7. Okay, and at level 4, you also get to do an upgrade for your Skeletal Champion. So you've got Barbarian, Bard. Basically, they're going to give you some basic things that are added to the template associated with whatever type of upgrade you select. So me personally, I like Cleric and Bard the most probably out of these. I like Bard because it's going to give you access to some nice spells. And like I said, most of the other undead party members you get do not have access to spells. So having your Skeletal Champion with Mirror Image or Haste, Confuse, things of that nature, it is kind of nice. But again, you don't get to choose any of the attributes or feats of the Skeletal Champion. And so really, the stuff that affects your party members is much more effective than anything that affects enemies, because you're not able to really specialize the champion to punch through enemy defenses. And then Cleric is a little bit nice because you do not get any pure Cleric party members from your undead options. You do get a War Priest, but that's about it. So it can be nice to have somebody else with access to some of those Cleric spells that can distribute those buffs amongst your team. If you wanted to instead focus on the champion's ability to be a great archer, it might be worth taking a Skeletal Fighter so that its base attack bonus will equal its full HD, which should give it an extra attack and make it more effective overall. At Mythic level 5, I get Enduring Spells. So again, the Lich is pretty much your main spellcaster. And while I prefer using potions and spells for the buffs that you're going to use over and over and over and over and over again, there are some buffs that are 24 hours. And so I find that those buffs where I can just put it on and know it's going to last a very long time, I don't mind using one spell slot in the Lich's list in order to be able to go ahead and put that on. And so I find it useful to go ahead and take Enduring Spells and Greater Enduring Spells, because that way the Lich can cast things like True Seeing, protection from certain elements. All these things will last for 24 hours. That's very beneficial. At Mythic level 6, I chose Improved Initiative, and we already took the base Improved Initiative during feats, and that's because the Lich has some extremely powerful spells, and some of them are Area of Effect. It is absolutely to your advantage that the Lich grows first. There's a big difference between fights where the Lich goes first and fights where the Lich does not go first. It can pretty much wipe out any enemy that you decide you want to end as soon as possible. So I feel like it's worth it to go ahead and take this mythic option. Make sure that Lich gets the jump on the fight. And then for your Lich powers, I would go ahead and take Withering Life. So when a living creature takes damage from a spell cast by the Lich, that creature is also going to take 1 point of damage to Strength, Dexterity, and Constitution, or 1 point of damage to the other 3 attribute scores. And again, oftentimes you could do area of effects, so you can lower the Strength, Dexterity, Constitution for an entire group twice in one round, which I find to be very effective in combination with all the other terrible things that my powers are capable of doing. And then at level 7, I go ahead and take Greater Enduring Spells. At level 8, I take Sorcerer's Reflex, which gives you the ability to cast your first spell as a swift action if that spell is either of a first level or at least 2 levels lower than the maximum level of spells you can cast. Obviously, as a Lich, you can get all the way up to spell level 10, so there are some very, very powerful spells that you'll be able to cast as Quicken just because of this mythic ability. And you do get to choose another upgrade for your skeleton, so out of the 3 that I mentioned before, choose one that still interests you. And then at level 9, I would go with Favorite Meta Magic and Power, which is going to give you some more flexibility regarding how you set up your spells. There's definitely a case to be made if you wanted some additional protection to get Archmage armor, but most of the time I'm keeping the Lich in the back. He's getting the jump on the fights to eliminate the most powerful enemies as quickly as possible. So I didn't feel like I really needed this, but if you're playing on a harder difficulty or just in general playing the Lich a little bit differently, it might behoove you to go ahead and pick that up. And then for Lich powers, I chose Indestructible Bones. This is going to give you some additional damage resistance. And whenever an enemy lands a hit on the Lich, the enemy is going to suffer a -2 penalty to attack rolls until the end of the combat. Okay, now that we've went through character levels and the mythic level, let's go ahead and take a look at the spell book. At spell level 1, of course, I have Magic Armor, gives the Lich a little bit extra protection, and then use a lot of Expeditious Retreat, which is basically haste without the boost to defense or the additional attack. This is great to have when you're in places like Dresden or just home bases where you don't have access to your entire party, or if you don't want to have to burn one of your haste potions. Earlier in the game, you're going to use a lot of buffs like Reduce Person, Enlarge Person, Shield, things of that nature, especially if you follow this build and you don't have spell penetration. There are some of those necromancy spells that are just not going to be useful to you. So it's better to just be of use to your overall party until you have access to some of the better spells. Then at spell level 2, again, you're going to focus on ways to both protect yourself and boost your party. So we've got Blur, which is absolutely fantastic for any of your upfront party members. False Life is going to give the Lich a little bit more health. Protection from Alignment Communal is going to be great when you know what type of creature you're going to face. Gives you some additional protection against the things they might do. And then Mirror Image is again going to give your Lich more survivability. Scare is an absolutely fantastic debuff early in the game, and you can use Bone Shaker to do some damage earlier in the game as well. But over time, these spells are going to be outclassed by some of the other things that you have available to you. Then at spell level 3, you're going to have Animate Dead. You're going to have Displacement, which only lasts for 1 round per level, but is again fantastic protection for your tanks. You might earlier in the game end up using Greater Magic Weapon on your Lich to be able to get to some of your other party members, but over time you should definitely have other party members that will take control of that and will allow you to free up slots to do other things. Haste is absolutely fantastic. As you'll see in some of these other spell levels, sometimes you specifically take a spell because you must know a spell in order to make a scroll or a potion out of it. So in this particular case, we take haste not because we're going to put it into our slots, but because this frees us up to be able to make potions so we don't have to put it into our slots. And then I do have protection from arrows communal and resist energy communal slotted because the Lich is going to be able to make them last for 24 hours, and it's great protection for our group. Earlier in the game, you're going to use See Invisibility communal, but over time, it's going to be outclassed by True Seeing communal. Now, as far as the Lich spells, there's Corrupted Blood, which can make a target nauseated for 1 round per caster level. I don't particularly use that. There's also Power from Death. You're not to gain strength from fallen allies and enemies alike, so you gain a +1 attack rolls, saving throws, and damage rolls for every dead creature in a 30-foot radius up to a maximum of 3 + 1 per 5 caster levels. Obviously, we don't use this because we're not doing anything that requires us to do attack rolls. And I find it kind of a pain to try to figure out, okay, are there any dead people around at this particular time who would allow me to take advantage from this? So I don't slot this, but Mastery of Flesh is fantastic. When used against an enemy, this spell deals 4d8 plus caster level damage to living targets and 2d8 plus caster levels to undead targets. And you can also use it to heal allies. I like the kind of spells where I can just set it and forget it, and you could just have them cast Mastery of Flesh again and again and again. Then at Mythic level 4, False Life Greater again gives the Lich a little bit more protection flexibility. Dimension Door is really nice to have, especially in Act 4. There will be a lot of situations where you're going to want to be able to teleport your entire party. So it's nice to have a couple of these here. It probably was possible for me to make a scroll or a potion out of it, and I just didn't look into that. But regardless of how you do it, make sure that you have Dimension Door available for those times when you really want to use it. We have an empowered version of Mastery of Flesh here at level 4, and remember, we took the mythic option, so it only raises things 1 level as opposed to 2. That's going to happen much later in the game in my particular build, but you may find that you really want to have that type of flexibility earlier, and so of course you could take the mythic option earlier. Another option is you could take the Metamagic Feat Heighten spell, which is going to allow you to manually heighten or lower the spell level of some of the spells that you want to be able to use. Up to you and how your playthrough is going. Of course, we have the option for Animate Dead here, so we take a couple of slots forward, specifically because we have that commanding infusion, so they can be nice distractions. They're not really going to hit up enemies, especially not bosses, but they're very nice to be able to throw out as distractions, and they're going to be sturdier for you than they would be for non-Lich classes, so they'll last a couple of rounds as opposed to all just being laid out immediately the way they are for most of the other mythic paths you would play. The rest of this stuff I took only because you get so many opportunities to take spells as a Lich that you have to fill it up with something. And of course, we have protection from energy to match resist energy and give us more protection from energy elements enemies might try to use. At spell level 5, we take Vampiric Shadow Shield because it will do some additional protection for the Lich, and we can slot it in our favorite school slot. So that is one thing to keep in mind. You'll notice at level 3, I forgot to select a base necromancy power. The necromancy powers you get from Lich, for whatever reason, do not count as spells you can put into these slots. So to ensure that you do not have a empty spell slot just sitting here, you want to choose a necromancy spell from the base spell book outside of the powers that you get from being a Lich. And so I forgot to do that at level 3, but at level 5, I have the Vampiric Shadow Shield, which they will allow me to put here. Stone Skin Communal is going to give some physical damage resistance for the entire party. Great stuff for your party members. Animal Growth is going to significantly increase the strength, constitution, and size of a pet. And one of your party members is a Chevalier, so he's sitting on a horse. The horse will greatly benefit from the spell, and so we want the Lich to use it because that means it'll last for 24 hours. Really good stuff. As far as the Lich spells that you get from here, Bone Explosion is an area effect damage power. I don't use it because it affects all creatures, so you have to manually targeted in order to ensure it does not affect your party members. I don't want to be bothered with that. Deny death allows you to place a ward on your party members that will guarantee that they will not die. But the thing is, if it saves them from dying, they're going to be paralyzed until the end of the battle. I don't particularly care for that, so I don't use it. And then repurpose allows you to basically select one target who's going to get continual damage. And then if they die while this curse is on them, they're going to be revived as an undead creature. I prefer the powers that just go ahead and deal direct damage. I don't need additional mechanics to be involved in it, but it is really cool. So you could, of course, use it in your build if you like. At level 5, what I use most is Exsanguinate. You force the target's blood to overflow in its body. The target receives 1d6 damage per caster level. And as you can see, my caster level right now is 29. It makes a fortitude saving throw. If it fails, the target receives 1d6 strength damage and 2d6 bleed damage. So you can see how the strength damage that we do here is then going to stack on top of the attribute damage we're going to deal based around, what was it, Magic Devour or Withering Life, based upon the damage that Withering Life does to enemies as well. So great stuff. Then at spell level 6, again, we've got a throwaway Lich power that we really wouldn't use. There's Banshee Blast, which is great, but it's just not as great as all the great Lich spells that we get. Bone Shield is great protection for your Lich, gives you a +6 shield bonus to AC and immunity to critical hits. Not really nice stuff. And then False Grace is going to give false life to all of your allies in a 30-foot radius, and it's going to do it for 3d10 plus caster level temporary hit points. Very nice. Earlier in the game, you're probably going to use Dispel Magic Greater, but later in the game, you're going to get an even better version of Dispel Magic. And I think earlier we also had the first version of Dispel Magic that you get. There are definitely enemies you'll run into that will have buffs that you'll want to strip off to make things easier for yourself. And the Lich should be absolutely fantastic at that. So it's worth having Dispel Magic on him. And then for my damaging power, I just used an empowered version of Exsanguinate. One note about this power that I forgot to mention, the target must have blood. And there are definitely some powerful targets that do not have blood. So sometimes you'll be able to use Mastery of Flesh on those particular creatures. Other times, it might just be more worth your while to use a commanding infusion and throw out some undead, and then let the undead and your party members take care of whoever this particular enemy is. It's definitely popped up from time to time, but it's never been a big deal where there was a creature that I really had trouble taking down and my Lich was just not very useful against it. That has not happened. And now in spell level 7, for the throwaway power, we just put in Finger of Death. We also have Ice Body, which again is going to give a bunch of great protection for your Lich. And we also took Legendary Proportions and True Seeing Communal, again, because we want to make them into potions and scrolls. That'll be very useful for your party. As far as Lich spells, you have Restore Undead. This spell fully heals all allied undead creatures. I never use this, but it's available to you. Blessing of Unlife allows you to take a creature that is living and basically make it operate as undead. So I always have at least one casting of this because I want to put it on the horse, who is not actually undead. Even if you choose the semi-undead class, it's still not going to heal from negative energy, and it's not going to have all the protections. So this is going to ensure that the horse operates the same way the rest of the undead party operates as well. You could also use this to keep more regular party members like Nanio or Camellia on your team while still allowing them to operate essentially as undead if you wanted to. And as you can see, it lasts for 10 minutes per level, so you can easily put this on a party member and it'll last an entire dungeon. And then for damage, we're going to use Feast of Blood, which is basically the area of effect version of Exsanguinate. Very powerful stuff. You can wipe out entire rooms with this. Then at level 8, we're going to go ahead and take Death Clutch to put in the favorite school slot. Frightful Aspect. fits right in with Lich. It gives you a bunch of stat bonuses that you don't really care about, but it's going to also give you an aura that will shake all the enemies that are around you, which is exactly what a Lich should do. And so I feel like it fits right in with this. Also, because you do end up with a guy with double scimitars that I think is great to use for the type of builds where he's shaking all the creatures, it makes it very easy to set up all of your melee undead party members with feats like Shatter Defenses, where they take advantage of fighting enemies who are already shaken. And then as far as the Lich specific powers that you get, Domain of the Hungry Flesh. So it's basically a pit that you can open up under enemies. I don't use it, but it looks absolutely awesome, and the description of it is fantastic as well. Embrace of Death. So you surround the target with necromantic energies, embracing it with the power of an unlife. If the target fails a will saving throw, it falls into a coma and starts receiving 1d6 constitution drain every round. Now, this can be fantastic for boss creatures if you can get it to hit, but the Lich has so many powers that are very, very efficient at completely removing enemies from the field that focusing on a power where it's really about debuff or crowd control just seems like a waste to me. Like, yeah, you can use this power and the enemy will fall to the ground, or you could just use Exsanguinate and kill it outright. So to me, I don't use this, but you know, your mileage might vary. I go ahead and just empower Feast of Blood and fill up my slots with that. And then at level 9, we go ahead and take Wail of the Banshee, put it in favorite school slots. Heroic Invocation and Foresight are here so we can make scrolls and potions out of them. Fiery Body gives more protection for the Lich. Mind Blank Communal gives protection for the entire team against spell attacks. As far as the Lich spells that are here, Flay for Purpose is basically just like Repurpose, which we talked about here. Basically, you can mark a target and then it'll revive as one of your undead. But this particular version of the spell does more damage. So it makes it much easier to ensure that you're actually able to kill and then revive a particular enemy. Again, not something I bother with, but it is really, really cool. Corrupt Magic is essentially the ultimate version of Dispel Magic. It can dispel multiple spells, starting with the highest level spells and then proceeding to lower level spells. And like all Lich spells, it is not affected by a target spell resistance. Also, the target receives a -1 penalty to attack and damage rolls, saving throws, and AC for every dispelled effect. So obviously this is great, great stuff. You can throw this on a boss that has a lot of buffs you really want to take off, and it'll make it much easier for you to be able to deal with that particular enemy as long as this is able to strip off those buffs. And then finally, the one that I use the most is Negative Eruption. This spell acts as a harm spell, but affects all creatures in a 30-foot radius. Additionally, all affected undead creatures gain +2 bonus to attack rolls, damage rolls, will saving throws, and twice the caster level temporary hit points. And then harmed, it actually charges the subject with negative energy that deals 10 points of damage per caster level. So you can use this to both do a ton of damage to your enemies while also healing and buffing your party members. Great, great stuff. I feel like this is definitely well worth having. And then finally, there are the level 10 powers, which are all from the Lich. So you have Pit of Despair, which is going to create a pit around a Nightshade Nightcrawler. So it works as a create pit spell, but it additionally channels negative energy for 1d6 damage per caster level. That could be really, really cool. And then Doom to Servitude. This spell works as Repurpose and consequently also like Flay for Purpose, except the duration is permanent. The target is immediately dealt 1d6 unholy damage per 2 caster levels unless the enemy can pass a fortitude save, and then 1d6 unholy damage per caster level every round until its death. If the target dies during the effect, it is revived after death as an undead creature under your command. So again, this is going to make it much easier for you to be able to get another undead warrior on your side. Great stuff, but me personally, my favorite level 10 power, absolute death. Feeling of the imminent death fills the target's heart. It makes a will saving throw. If it fails, which it oftentimes does, even against bosses, the target immediately dies. If the save is successful, the target receives 10 damage per caster level. So this is absolutely fantastic, fits in line with the way I like to use Lich spells as a way to basically obliterate any enemy I'm going up against. But really, you can't go wrong. As you can see, the Lich just has an absolutely fantastic arsenal of different spells that you can choose from. And there are a lot of throwaway spells that I used, that I took, honestly. So, you know, level 1 has way more spells than you actually need. Level 2 has way more spells than you actually need. So if anywhere in this list, 1 through 9, you don't see some spells that you feel like you like to use and would be really useful, you absolutely have the freedom to be able to switch some stuff out and be able to plug those in and get the exact magic build that you want. Really cool stuff. As far as the items that I put on the Lich, I have a staff that whenever I cast the same spell 3 times in a row, the next spell becomes empowered. I have arcane persistence boots, so when I cast the same spell for the 4th time during the day, the next spell of that becomes quickened. And as you can see from the spell book, there are a lot of spells where I have 7 or 8 castings of them, because I just right click on it and let the Lich just keep throwing them out, throwing them out, throwing them out. So these both definitely come in handy. Gloves of the Enduring Wizard. Whenever the wearer of these gloves casts a level 7 or higher spell, they get 20 temporary hit points for 1 minute. So just another way to make sure the Lich stays on their feet. This is a item that you could potentially get after the transformation. You won't necessarily get it, depends on your choices, but it gives me a +6 enhancement bonus to all mental ability scores, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Also, since I have the ability to channel negative energy, it increases the amount of damage that ability does to living creatures or heals to undead creatures by +2d6, which is why my head slot is empty, because originally I had a +6 to intelligence, but now I don't need that anymore. And at this point, I still hadn't found some headgear that really fit for the Lich. The Robe of Determination is whenever I cast a spell that forces an enemy to make a 42 saving throw, the DC of the save is increased by 2. There are plenty of spells in the Necromancy School that are going to do that. It also gives me a +2 bonus on caster level checks to overcome spell resistance, and a +4 bonus to concentration checks and additional spell resistance. None of that matters for the Lich, but that first part will definitely help you. As a Lich, you cast a spell, so you definitely shouldn't be wearing armor. I've got an amulet that gives me a +5 natural armor enhancement, and it also grants a +2 bonus to my highest ability score. So of course that's intelligence, gives me more intelligence there. I get a +1 insight bonus on attack and damage. That's irrelevant, but I do get a +10 competence bonus on persuasion skill checks. That definitely helps me out, especially with the low charisma that I had before I became a true Lich. My cloak is the Bound of Possibility, so whenever the Lich wears this cloak, his Lore Beyond the Grave, which is the ability that basically buffs all of the undead party members around me, that will give my party members an additional +4 bonus to strength, dexterity, and charisma ability scores on top of the original buff that they get for those scores because I'm a Lich. Really cool stuff. Ring of Summoning. All allies, including the wearer, within 30 feet gain a +2 bonus to weapon damage rolls and a +2 bonus on saving throws against attacks made or effects created by chaotic creatures. Like I said before, most of your allies are martial based, so this helps out my party a ton. I also have Ring of the Undercover Wizard. Whenever the wearer of this ring hits 2 or more enemies with a single spell, which the Lich is going to do all the time, it grants the wearer total concealment against ranged attacks for 2 rounds. Whenever the wearer kills 2 or more enemies with a single spell, which again the Lich was going to do all the time. It grants the wearer total concealment against ranged attacks for the rest of the battle. Really cool stuff, perfect for this build. And then finally, the phylactery I gained from being a Lich. This item grants its wearer the deadly magic ability. If the wearer already has deadly magic, it grants them 2 additional uses. In addition, once per day, whenever the wearer's health falls below 0, it is restored to a maximum. This can only be equipped by a Lich. So obviously the second part really helps us. The first part, we did not take deadly magic. It allows your spells to automatically bypass spell resistance. So basically it'll make it where you did not need spell penetration, even if that spell would usually require it. We did not take that because we're mainly only using Lich spells anyway, and they automatically bypass spell resistance. But if you wanted to switch things up and use offensive spells that did require you to have spell penetration, deadly magic would be extremely beneficial to you. And then of course, because I am a magic user, we have a suite of wands that we're using as well to be able to quicken, maximize, or empower spells based upon whatever our need is at a particular time. Okay, so now we're in a combat example. We just started and you see the professor's initiative check is 43, more than anybody else in the party or anybody we're going up against. Let's him get out there first. I think this should be hasted, right? So we are going to go ahead and use the empowered version of Exsanguinate. The giant should have blood. And yes, so we used that, did 279 damage. Unholy, empowered, and maximized. Oh, did I have the wand on? I had a wand on, right? Okay, so it was empowered and maximized when I did this. And it did 1 point of strength, dexterity, and constitution damage. And then because I'm using Exsanguinate, it also did 9 points of strength damage to the giant on top of that. Definitely could not handle that, went down immediately. Okay, and we're back. The giants got closer. One of them is shaken now, probably because I have on Frightful Aspect. So again, it's very useful for you to have party members with shattered defenses. And because we've got 2 of them, let's go ahead and use the area of effect version. So we will first quicken. Oh, it's not going to let me quicken it. That's interesting. First, we'll go with the Grand Master Rod then, which is going to allow us to maximize and empower a spell. So we'll use the regular version of Feast of Blood. And there we go. Same deal for both of them. 279 damage on both of them. Did a bunch of attribute point damage to one Ash Giant. Then did the same attribute damage plus the 9 strength damage to the other Ash Giant. So I think it's very apparent. The Lich is absolutely incredible, and pretty much no matter what combination of spells you're going to use, if you're focusing on being a magic user, the Lich is the way to go. I've had a fantastic time with this class and with this mythic path, and hopefully you also can see value in the build and would be willing to use it for your playthrough. But let me hear your comments. What are your thoughts? Is there anything I could have done to make this build better? Is there a change that you would have made to make it even more effective? Let me know down in the comments. Looking forward to hearing your feedback. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like down below, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.